Hi, my name is Holly DeVault and I'm from the University of Georgia Savannah River Ecology Lab. I work in the outreach department as an environmental educator. And today we're going to talk a little bit about wetlands and watersheds and how water moves through our environment. So what I have here is a model of a watershed. And a watershed is any area of land that all drains into one water outlet. So what we have here is a high point, and all of the water that comes onto this board will drain down into the lake. So let's demonstrate how that happens. So we'll start at the farm. When a farmer plows up his soil in order to plant plants, there's loose soil on the surface. So I'm just using some cinnamon to represent the soil. And once the plants start coming up, he'll put down some fertilizer. And then sometimes a farmer will spray pesticides to keep insects from destroying his crop. And some farmers also have livestock. So we have some cows here, and what goes in a cow must eventually come out. So I will use some sprinkles, and that represents cow manure. And this cow here is allowed into the little stream. And as he walks through the soil, he stirs it up and breaks down the plants that hold the soil in along the banks. And that soil can become loose. So let's imagine a light rain. A normal sprinkle, nothing too drastic. You can see that the particles of fertilizer and pesticides are dissolving a little, and there's no runoff yet. Everything is staying in the field. So at this point, the soil is able to absorb these things, and there is no runoff. But with a really heavy rain, the soil gets saturated so quickly and it doesn't have time to absorb these things. And as you can see, it ends up in the lake. And the same thing with our cows. A heavy rain washes all of those things off of the top of the ground, and it ends up in our little stream, and our stream empties into the lake. So as the soil moves from the cropland into the lake, it will eventually settle out and form a layer of soil, adding, after rain after rain after rain, adding more soil to the bottom of the lake. And this can essentially smother living things, plants and animals, and it can kill them. And there are some things that farmers can do to help prevent soil and fertilizers and pesticides from getting into the water. For instance, they can not plow their fields all the way up to the water. They can leave a strip of plants between their fields and the lake. Or they can plant a new garden near the edge of their fields to absorb the pesticides and the fertilizers that try to run off of the field and into the water. So I put a little piece of green felt here to represent that buffer of plants. So when another rain comes, the roots from those plants can actually absorb those pesticides and extra fertilizers. And then as you can see, when the water makes it to the lake, there's still some. The plants can't remove everything, but that water is a lot cleaner than the water that's running into the strip of wetlands. And also, the farmer can do things to keep his cows out of the stream. He can build a fence along the edge to not let them in at all, or he can put a fence across the stream and fence out a small area to allow the cows to get some water without wrecking the entire stream. And he can also plant a nice big shade tree, because when it's hot in the summer, the cows get hot and they will find a shady, cool spot. So they will be more likely to hang around under the tree rather than rolling in the stream, causing pollution. Homeowners and other recreational places like golf courses also use pesticides and fertilizers trying to grow their plants. So let's say in the spring the homeowner puts down some fertilizer to make that grass nice and green, and maybe some weed killer so their grass looks perfect. And the golf course does the same thing. And you can see some of these pesticides and fertilizers don't stay where they're supposed to. Some go right into the road and on the parking lot. So even without a heavy rainfall, we're starting with dirty surfaces that are not absorbing the fertilizers or the pesticides. And people also have been known to throw trash out their car windows, like you see plastic shopping bags around. And some older cars leak oil, so we'll put little drops of oil on the roads, and we can see what happens there. In this corner we have a factory. A factory is often allowed to, or an industrial site is often allowed to release certain amounts of things that might be toxic or dangerous to us in large amounts. And these smaller amounts have been found to be safe. And so there are people who watch over these industries, and they are heavily regulated to make sure they don't release too much of these compounds. So let's say one day there's an accident at the factory and too many of their pollutants make it out to the stream. As you can see, it ran into this gully and straight into the stream. That is not a good thing, and people would probably notice, and this industry would very likely be fined for the incident. So let's have the rain come down again. And as you can see, it takes a little while before runoff occurs. But you can see this is not clear water. The pesticides and the fertilizers and even the trash is getting blown by this storm. And where does it go? Gravity pulls it to its lowest point. And that, in a watershed, ends up being the lake in this instance. In this corner represents a construction area. They're building a new house. And before they can plant the grass and the shrubs and trees, after they build a new building, you have bare soil. And anytime there is bare soil, it is probably not going to stay there with a heavy rain. So you can see the heavy rain is now flooding the neighboring houses. Their yards are flooded, and all of this loose soil is then going into the road, which then goes to the lake. But there are ways that we can change our habits and change what we do to prevent this from happening. So at a construction site, they can do something similar to an agricultural field. The farmer leaves a strip of plants between the loose soil and where the water would drain into the road. Also, as homeowners, if we need to use fertilizers or pesticides to grow the plants that we love, make sure to only use as much as necessary and only pesticides as the last resort. Another thing we can do is to not litter and to keep our yards and roadways tidy. You can volunteer for a group that does Adopt a Highway to pick up trash, and don't be a contributor to the problem for sure. Another way that we can help keep our water clean is to not destroy our natural wetlands or places that stay wet for any amount of time during a calendar year, and build new wetlands where they're needed. Here I have this sponge, and I'm going to put it at another point that's very low. It's just right next to the lake. So a lot of these areas will drain through the wetland before it makes it to the lake, and that will help clean the water, take out soil erosion and other chemicals that might be bad for us if they were to make it to the lake. Now that my wetland is in place, let's see how well it works. With a heavy rain, everything from the trash to chemicals to loose soil, it travels through the neighborhood and drains through the storm drain, and this wetland is able to capture some of these chemicals and loose soil before it makes it to the lake. So what I would like you to take away from all of this is that it's important that each and every one of us does our share to keep our water clean. And the ways we can do that is to pick up pet waste, don't litter, pick up trash, use chemicals responsibly, and be good stewards of our environment. Thank you. We just learned a lot of information with our display model, so now let's see some examples in our community. Believe it or not, this stream used to be small enough for people to walk across, but now it is an impassable ravine. Stormwater runoff from more than 1,000 acres of the city has been directed through the area over many years. This has caused the erosion of much sediment that has been carried downstream and filled other wetland areas. Much trash can be seen along the edges and in the bed of this drainage, including some failed attempts to try to slow down the flow of water during rain events. This ecological disaster is happening in one of the largest urban forests in the United States. Understanding the importance of watersheds has led to the use of practices to protect these areas. Here we have a newly constructed bridge. Silt fencing was put in place before construction to prevent the movement of sediment. Although the bridge is complete, the silt fencing has been left in place for a while until vegetation has returned. The use of some large rocks also helps to prevent sediment from being washed away. The alligator on the log appreciates the protection of his home during this entire process. Another practice to protect local watersheds is to build retention ponds in areas where there is much development. These ponds will capture the excess runoff water during rain events and slowly release some of it into local streams. This pond is surrounded by several impermeable surfaces such as shopping centers with large parking lots. Let's each do our part to help keep our community and watersheds clean.